So I read all of them?
Just that last.
Which was starting from Daniel, or no, Talmud Torah?
Yeah, annual Talmud Torah.
So the annual Talmud Torah sponsor the Tilson family as a schus for B'Suras Tovas for Am Yisrael. We'll continue the next ones. Yeah? Okay. Also by Aaron and Alana Weinberg, in thanks to Hashem for all his nisim, both the revealed and the hidden, for the miracles of Jonathan Shai Weinberg 14 years ago, for B'Suras Tovas for Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, and in the merit of the speedy arrival of Mashiach. Also sponsored by Daniel Batsheva Pava in commemoration of the second yahrzeit of Batsheva's father, Reb Shlomo ben Yehuda Aryeh of Philadelphia, which is on the 7th of Tammuz. He was a child survivor of Auschwitz and left over 100 descendants. Shem Shalom and Aliyah. Much appreciated. Okay. We are on the bottom of 17b, Yud Zayin Omid Beis. We have the tragic story of Rav Chanina ben Tradion. What's tragic is not just the fact that he's going to be executed, but reading the details of what was done to his family members is quite harsh. It's a significant event also because, actually, believe it or not, it's the day of his passing is recorded in Shulchan Aruch. There is a section of Shulchan Aruch that's labeled, it's titled Days Where It's Recommended to Fast, okay? And one of the dates is the 27th of Sivan, if I'm not mistaken. And it mentions there that it was the day of the passing or the execution of Rav Chanina ben Tradion. So we're going to read a few more details regarding what occurred there. And in Talmudic style, it's not just going to mention what the Romans did to him, but we are of belief that if something occurs here in this physical world, there's a spiritual reason behind it, some kind of flaw, and obviously a very minor flaw because we're talking about righteous people. But the Talmud does identify the spiritual weakness that brought about this harsh punishment, which we're going to read about, that took place for Chanina ben Tradion, his wife, and his daughter. And the Talmud, where we're holding now, a few lines from the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom, of Asyuo le Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion. So they brought Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion, the Romans, Omrule, and they turned to him and they say, Amai ka'asakto be'oraisa. In other words, we made a decree, you should not be teaching Torah, and for sure not in public. Why were you doing it? Why were you violating our laws? Omar lahu, and he answered, not an answer that works well with the Romans, but one that inspires us many years later. Ka'asher tzivoni Hashem Elokai. It's the commandment of the Almighty. Nothing else is relevant for me, and a tragic ending for him, but he lives on because we are studying here today because of people like him. Miyad Godzru Olav, immediately there was a decree upon him, Listreifa, that he's going to be burnt alive. Ve'al ishto lehariga, and his wife will be killed by sword. Ve'al bito, and his daughter as well, she will be placed leishev bekuva shel zonos, in a brothel. So it's an awful punishment, but we're going to have to understand why other family members deserved, at least analyzing, the spiritual part of it. Why did they have to suffer in such a way? All of l'sreifa, so the Talmud tells us, and now we move on to the top of our daf, what was the flaw that led him to be burnt? Hoge es Hashem be'osio. So here we have it, be'osio sav. So here we have this violation, that we have a sensitivity not to utter the name of the Creator, and it seems to be that he would utter it. We'll see soon why. Now, when we talk about the name of the Creator, what exactly is the name of the Creator that we are talking about? So there are 2 approaches here. Rashi tells us that it is a name that has 42 letters. 42 letters. What exactly is that name? Well, obviously above our pay grade. But if you are ever bored during Kabbalah Shabbos, and right before Lachadodi you get to Ana B'Koach, and you count those words, you can actually have 72. And if you take the first letter, right? The first letter, or 42, excuse me, I'm going with the different one, 42. And if you take the first letter of those 42 words, it appears you get that. But be careful with it, okay? Because you see the results are simply not good. Hoges Hashem ba'os Yosef. Now the Talmud asks, wait a second, Hanani ben Tari is a tremendous great scholar, a great Torah personality. How did he do so? You're not supposed to utter it. In other words, why did he violate this teaching? And it's well known, Vahatznan, it's mentioned in a Mishnah, Elu, that these are people, she'ein lohem chelek le'olam habo, they have no portion in the world to come. Number one, ha'omer ein Torah min hashamayim, if a person claims that there is no Torah from heaven. Number two, ve'ein tchias ha'meisi min Torah. If you remember in Sanhedrin, we talked about the fact that when someone claims that there is no source in our text in the Torah for the concept of tchiat hametim, and Abba Shaul adds to the list, Af ha'hogeh et Hashem ba'os Yosef. You're not supposed to utter the name. So why did he do it? Okay. The answer is lehislamed ovad. In other words, there are things in Judaism that we don't do, but if it's for educational purposes, either for educating self or educating others, it becomes permissible. We find it regarding laws of Avoda Zara, for example, and some other ones. And here the Talmud is going to tell us that the reason Hanan ben Tradion did it was lehitlamed, to teach himself or others. And the Brisa indicates that, Kidetanya, lo silmad la'asos, when the Torah warns us that when we come to the land of Israel, we should not perform acts that were done by the pagans that lived there, but the Torah adds the words lo tilmad la'asot, to perform. And we learn from that, aval ata lamed lehavin, it is permissible to understand pagan culture. To what? To understand what you avoid and how to guide others what to avoid. So therefore, we're taught here, atalomed lahavinu lehoros, and it seems that he applied that same concept to the prohibition of uttering the name of the Creator, that he did it for educational purposes. So, okay, now that we have finally a heter, right, to go ahead and utter it because he did it for something that is permissible, so why was he punished? The answer is Mishum Hoget Hashem befarhesya de'aved. It was in public. In other words, there are some things that, yes, you have a need to know. There's no question about it, that would be permissible. But he lacked the sensitivity of doing it in a private form. He did it in public. That's what the Talmud seems to say. Now, the question is, why was there such a harsh punishment on his wife? Ve'al ishto lehariga, that his wife's going to be killed by sword? The answer is, the Talmud tells us, Delo micha bey. She didn't stop her husband. Now, so some commentators wonder, wait a second. In other words, in all situations, do wives, many, yes, but in all situations, can wives control what their husbands are teaching and preaching in public? We're not sure about that. Right? In some cases, yes, some cases not. So the Chassam Sofer actually takes an approach that the lack of mecha'ah, the lack of preventing another party from performing a violation was not directed toward the activities of her husband, but rather the daughter. As we'll see soon, there was something that was done by the daughter that was lacking, and that was the area where there was an expectation that the mother plays a role and guides. But that's not the simple reading. Simple reading seems to be that this is a woman that did have the ability to go ahead and tell her husband, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. Mikan Amru, and this is the well-known teaching, Kol misheyesh biyado limchos. If there is someone that is performing an act that's not appropriate, and you have the ability to prevent, to rebuke, to guide, and you don't, ve'ina mocha, ne'enosh, all of you get punished. In other words, we have a responsibility towards one another. Either, obviously, we have to have common sense to know what we do say and what not to say. If there's someone doing something and they're not going to listen, you can be quiet. But in a situation that you have the ability to influence, we do have a responsibility. And now we move on to the difficult part. Ve'albito, the daughter of Hanina ben Tradion, is going to be placed bekuva shel zonos, in a brothel. What she do wrong in the spiritual realm? The Omer Rav Yochanan, so Rav Yochanan shares a tradition. Pam achas, one time, Haisam bito mehaleches lifnei gdolei Romi. She was walking in front of the great leaders of Rome. I don't know if that means that she was actually visiting Rome, or it could be that it was in Caesarea and Caesarea, where there was a presence of the Roman Empire in the land of Israel, and her father was interacting, and she was there, and they commented on the daughter. Omru, Kama noos psiosea, how beautiful and how wonderful are the steps shel rivazu of this young lady. Okay? They made a comment. And what did she do? Miyad, immediately, dikdeka bepsiosea. She went and she upgraded her steps. Okay, now there are two ways to understand it. One of them is more in a sexual approach, that they were a little bit attracted to her, and she made herself even more. That's a little bit of a harsh reading, and again, on a very small level. There are those that say, actually, that she was walking in a very modest way, in a regal way, and they were commenting on how regal she looks. And that's very appropriate to walk in a regal way, in an honorable way, in a modest way. But the fact is that when you do something in public and you're given a compliment and then you enhance it, that indicates that you're not doing it totally for the sake of heaven. You're doing it more for what the crowd says. And that was the area, this is how the Baalei Musar work with this, that sometimes we do things in public, we get a compliment, we kick it up a notch to do it even better. What does that indicate? We're not doing it for the right reason. Greatness is to do things when no one else notices, right? As we'll see some later in this daf. And that was a little bit the issue, that she did something not for the sake of heaven, and it's a harsh punishment. Well, for righteous people, it seems like that's how the system works. Obviously, we have to have faith that up there in heaven, these are people that are sitting up there on a very high spiritual level. But in this world, we are taught that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very medactic. He's very specific and very detail-oriented with the activities of righteous people. V'ainu de Omar, Rab Shimon ben Lakish, this is what Shimon ben Lakish taught. My dechsiv, what is the writing? What are we told? Avon. Akavai Yesubeini, that the sins of my heel are the ones that surround me, which usually is referred to the idea that things that we just ignore, actions that we perform that we are not even aware of, are the ones that are going to surround us and we're going to have to be accounting for one day. But here it applies to actual steps. Akev, the heel. Avonot, sins. Sha'adam dash bikvota ba'akevav, sins that are performed sometimes by even with steps, like in this situation, ba'olam hazeh, in this world, Misubin lo, they are rolled over liyom hadin, to the day of judgment. Now, they are obviously going through a very harsh, difficult time. Rav Chanina ben Tradion, his wife, his daughter, but they retained complete faith and they uttered verses of faith as they are going through this terrible decree. And this is a concept of tziduk hadin, of lalenu at a funeral. These are verses that are said that are very important, that even at a time of difficulty, we have full recognition that nothing is random, but there's a reason from above. And they have their personal tziduk hadin taking place here, as they are being taken out to this harsh punishment. They made a declaration of the acceptance of judgment of the Creator. Hu Amar, the verse that came to Rav Chanina ben Tradion was Hatzur Tomim Polo. He's a creator which everything is tamim, is perfect, everything has a reason. Ishta Amra Kelamuna ve'en Avel. He's a God of faith, everything is faithful. There is no flaws in the system of the Creator. Bi'ito Amra Gedola Itzavarov Ha'alilo. You know what the daughter said? That the Almighty is a person, the Almighty is an entity that, as the verse in Yirmiya tells us, His eyes watch over everything that takes place, and anything that does occur to us is for a reason. Loses leish kidrachav. So that's the verse that she said. She said, Gadol Aitzavarav Alilo, he's an entity that thinks through everything. Asher einechab kuchos al kol darkei ish. That the Almighty knows what we are doing, is aware of it, and anything that is decreed upon us is for a reason. And therefore, she had the ability to declare that, yes, suffering I'm going through, but there's a reason for it. Omar Rabbi Kamakdolim Tzadikim Halo. Look how righteous they are, these three individuals. Shenizdamnu Lohen Shalosh Mikros Shel Tziduk Hadin. That the verses that came to them, all of them have to do with Tziduk Hadin, the acceptance of the justice of the Creator. B'sha'at Tziduk Hadin, at the time that they made such declaration. Okay, now Chanina ben Tradion is going to be interacting now with Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Yossi ben Kisma, if you do remember, in the last chapter of Pirkei Avos, it talks about a righteous person who was offered a lot of money to move somewhere where there's a lack of Torah, and he says, I am moving from a place where there's Torah. This is Yossi ben Kisma. And he seemed to be the leader at that time of the generation, probably older than Chanina ben Tradion. And he had a very different approach how to deal with the decree of the Romans. He felt that we have to keep a low profile and therefore deal and accept what they have to say, and that's how our tradition is going to survive. Chanina ben Tradion had a very different philosophy. He believed that if the Romans are here to uproot the essence of what Judaism is about, which is Torah, we're going to have to go ahead and give our life to it, because it's not going to be around in 2,000 years if we're going to just go ahead and lower our heads and not fulfill our responsibility of teaching others. So there's a very interesting interaction here that's going to take place between Yossi ben Kisma, who is more practical, more pragmatic, and Rav Chanina ben Tradion, who has his unique philosophy. Tana Rabban and the rabbis taught. Keshechola Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. So Yossi ben Kisma is an older man. He's ill. Hola Rav Chanina ben Tradion. The younger Chanina ben Tradion comes to visit him. Levakro. Omar lo. So Yossi ben Kisma turns to Chanina and says, Chanina achi, what's wrong with you? In other words, you're continuing to teach Torah in public, right, against the will and the decrees of the Roman Empire? Do you not know she'uma zumina shamayim lichua? In other words, it's the will of the Creator that they have full control and dominance over us. Look at their record. They destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Sarfa seicholo, they burnt the heichal. V'hargo es chasidav, and already many people were killed by them. Right? V'avda es tovov, the good ones are lost. V'adaini kayemes, and they're still around. So obviously that there's a decree from heaven, and we have to work with it. We can't ignore it. V'ani shamati alecha, and guess what I've heard about you? Chanina, you know what I heard about you? You're involved in Torah, not privately, not in a basement, but umakil kilos barabim. You're having these public gatherings, and you're doing it in a way that indicates that that's the essence of Torah, because as you lecture, as you teach, guess what you are doing? V'sefer Torah munach lecha b'cheikecha. You are showing that this is the essence of continuity of Torah by holding a Sefer Torah as you do it. So, what does Chanina ben Tradion say? No. Omar lo, Yossi, min hashamayim yirachamu. Heaven will have mercy, right? Ignoring all realities, heaven will have mercy. Yossi ben Kisma says to him, wait a second. Omar lo, ani omer l'chadvarim shaltam. I'm giving some logic here. I gave you a logical explanation, and what do you say? It doesn't work like that, right? In my opinion, you have to be practical. You have to be pragmatic. We always had different schools, it seems to be. And he was concerned, Tameani, I would be shocked. I'm concerned that the Romans, they're quite brutal, by the way. They're quite brutal. They're going to burn you. Ve'eis sefer Torah ba'esh, and the Torah scroll as well. I'm concerned that that's what's going to happen one day. They're going to go after you. Now, as Rav Yossi ben Kisma is leaving this world, Chanina ben Tradion asks him a question. It's a fascinating question. Chanina ben Tradion, extremely devoted to Torah, continuity of Torah. And he asks Rav Yossi ben Kisma, Omar Rabbi, my master, Ma ani lechayei ha'olam haba. Do I have a portion in the world to come? Seems like he had some kind of concern. Right? We're surprised, right? He's doing something that I think I would give him a portion of the world to come for what he did. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma doesn't say, yeah, you're doing well, you're teaching Torah, because he himself did not fully agree with that philosophy. But he said to him, tell me, Omar lo. So Yossi ben Kisma says, Chanina ben Tradion, tell me, is there something that came to your hand, or is there something that you were involved in that perhaps is an act of righteousness and would indicate that you are worthy of the world to come? And he said to him, Omar lo, yeah, you know what? I did something once, and I feel that that's a good act, and maybe that's an indication that I'm worthy of a portion to the world to come. And the story is that basically it was Purim, and he had two pockets. In one pocket, he had his personal funds for his own meal. And in the other pocket, he had communal funds that he collected from charity that were designated for the poor. When the poor people started coming, he gave out his own personal funds from his right pocket, right? The wrong pocket he turned to. Right? It's Purim. You never know what perhaps he was doing before, but he was giving out the wrong money. Come time at the end when he realizes that he gave out his personal funds and he still has the communal funds. So I think most of us would just say, okay, it's a swap. No, he didn't do that. He continued giving even from pocket number 2 that had the communal funds. He gave it all to the poor. Okay. Now, that was an act that was enough of an indication that he is worthy of a portion to the world to come. Omar Lo, here we have the story inside. I had coins that were designated for my own personal Purim Suda, and they got mixed up with coins of tzedakah. And I gave it all of them out to the poor. That was considered a great act. So Yosef ben Kisma says to him, Amar Lo, okay, Hanina, if that was a part of what you have done, I wish that my portion is like your portion, that should be my lot as well. So again, the Baalei Mussar talk about the fact that you do something in public, right? You teach him Torah in public. Maybe you're doing it because you want to feel worthy. You want to feel that you are accomplishing. To do something in private that no one knows about, and it could be that he didn't tell a soul until this interaction with Yossi Ber Kisma. And he tells them that, you know what, I did an act of charity and I got no credit because when I was giving to the poor, they didn't say thank you. They probably assumed that it's basically communal funds that you are giving out. It was his own meal, and he did not share with anyone. That act is an indication that his essence is goodness, and he has a portion in the world to come. Beautiful. Omru. So here we have, the story continues. As you remember, Rabbi Yossi is an ill person, he's old. Lohoyu Yomi Moatim, a few days passed by at Sheniftar Yosef ben Kisma. Yosef ben Kisma passed away. And due to the fact that he was good with the politicians, Holchu Kol Gdole Romi Lekovro, the funeral was present at the funeral were many of the leaders of the Roman officials in the land of Israel. Ve'spidu hesped gorol, there was a great eulogy. Ubechazaroson, but now, as they're making their way back, Matzoler of Chanina ben Tradion, they find Rav Chanina ben Tradion doing what he does. Shahaya Yosef ve'osek baTorah, involved in Torah, makil kilos barabim, doing it in a very public way. V'sefer Torah munach lo becheko, and he had the Sefer Torah, and it was time for punishment. It could be that up until now, out of respect for Yosef ben Kisma, they didn't want to go ahead and go after Chanina ben Tradion. Maybe in heaven they worked it out to avoid Yosef ben Kisma seeing the suffering of Chanina ben Tradion. But now starts the trouble. Hevi'uhu. They took Chanina ben Tradion. Ve'karchu b'Sefer Torah. They wrapped him in a Sefer Torah. Ve'kifu b'chavilei zmuros. And they took some kind of flammable material, some kind of branches, and they surrounded him, the Sefer Torah. Ve'hetzitu bohenes sa'ur. And they ignited it. Now, it seems to be that he will be dying very, very soon, but the Romans have some harsh brutality, and therefore they decided that they want to extend this pain, and they placed these sponges, wool sponges or wool bundles that were wet, and they placed it on him to extend the process of his death. Ve'heviu sefugin shel tzemer v'shrom b'mayim, and they put it in water. Ve'hinichum al libo, and they put it on his heart. Kedei shelo tetzeh nishmaso mehera, that his soul should not depart immediately. And now his daughter that was there said, Amra loy bita, the daughter turns to her father, Abba, erecha bekach, this is so painful to see you like it. Amra lo, and he says to Zara, listen here. Il molani nisrafti levadi, if I would be the only one being consumed by fire, it would have been indeed hard. Achshav shani nisraf, now that I'm being burned with Sefer Torah, even the Sefer Torah is with me, mi shemevakesh, may the one who seeks out elbona shel Sefer Torah, the shame of a Sefer Torah. In our tradition, always chas v'shalom, burnt Sefer Torah is something that we see as a great tragedy. So may the one who is going to go ahead and seek out the shame of a Sefer Torah, the one above, hu yivakesh elboni, he's going to seek out my own shame as well. In other words, he saw his lot together with the Sefer Torah, and indeed we're sitting here, 2,000 years later, studying his words as a part of study of Torah indicates that indeed they became all one. Omrulo, and the teacher and his disciples who were there realized that he's in a very spiritual moment. He was experiencing something on a very high spiritual level, and they said to him, Rabbi, Mata Roa, what do you see? Omar Lohan, he said to him, listen, Gilyo Nisrafin, right, or the Gvil Nisrafin. I do see indeed that the parchment of the Sefer Torah is burnt, but Osios Parchos, the letters as if float off. It's always the symbolism of throughout the ages, there are those who have tried to uproot us, and maybe they got rid of the physical, right, the parchment, but the letters live on. We're still here, right? We're doing the same thing. No one has had the ability of uprooting the letters, of inspiring future generations. Now, he's suffering, and his students realize that he could do something about it if he would open his mouth and breathe in the air. Maybe through smoke inhalation, he could go ahead and put an end to his suffering. So they say, Rabbi, open your mouth, you could put an end to this. Omar Lo, and he said to him, nope. That's not the way we work in Judaism. We try to extend life, and this often when there's a discussion in situations, when there's a person who's ill, and there is a question if there's a need to extend life, not to extend life, DNR, full code, all these questions, this section of Talmud is often turned to for guidance, because he stated, Mutov, it would be better, Shitzleno, that my soul be taken, Mishanosna, by the one who gave us the soul, the Creator, Va'al Yechavelu Ba'atzma, a person should not cause himself harm on his own, okay? Now, it seems to be that there was a Roman official who was in charge of the burning, and he's called a Calzantuniri. Sounds Italian, and he was from, right? The Calzantuniri was inspired by Rav Hanina ben Tradion, seeing the righteousness of this person, perhaps his serenity. There was something about what was taking place. And Omar lo Kalstuniri said to him, Rebbe, what if I just increase the fire to put an end to your suffering? And I'm going to go ahead, and I can make decisions. I have the right to do so. I'm going to remove those sponges, the wool sponges from your heart. But let me ask you, if I do that, because I want to put an end to your suffering, can you bring me to the world to come? Amar Lohen, which is interesting. He did give a green light to the official to put an end to his suffering somehow, which again is discussed. Moshe Feinstein has a discussion about it, that perhaps there's some more leniency for a non-Jew to do it. Hishavali, so he says to him, take an oath it's going to be so. And he took an oath that indeed, if he's going to perform this act of kindness, to not extend his suffering, he will merit a portion to the world to come. So he did so. Miyad hirba b'shaleves, he increased the flame. Not al sifugin shel tsermer, he removed the sponges, malibo. Yotza nishmasa b'mehera, the soul on the 27th of Sivan departed immediately. And it seems to be that this Kalsantuniri realized that he's on a very spiritual level at that point, and he recognized that, life the way he lives would not ever match what he experienced. Afu kofatz v'nofal letocha, or he himself jumped into the fire. Yotza baskol, and a voice from heaven came out, right? Here we have it. Someone like Hanina ben Tradion just left, his neshama departed. Someone that his whole life was for the sake of Torah, spirituality, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Klal Yisrael, and a Roman official, a Roman Kolsentiri, who for the past maybe 60 seconds has been devoted, okay? And they both neshamas depart at the same time. The voice from heaven comes and says, Va'amra, Rabbi Hanina ben Tradion, and the Kalstoniri, and the Roman official, the executioner, both of them in one sentence, Mezumonim hen lechaye ha'olam habo, they have a portion in the world to come. Okay, wow, together. Bocha Rebbe got emotional because, and this is not the first time that Rebbe expresses such an emotion. Va'omar, look how it works here. Yesh kone olama b'sha'achas. There are those that acquire the world to come with one decision. Look at the value of every moment. One decision, one moment. And this Executioner has a portion in the world to come. And there are others that have to go through a long, extended period of time to acquire the world to come. Maybe he meant about himself. He suffered Rabbi for 13 years, and this is Rabbi talking. There are those that it takes several years to acquire a portion in the world to come. Now, when we talked about Rav Chanina ben Tradion and his wife and his daughter, that's the one daughter that right now, unfortunately, is in a brothel. There's another daughter. The other daughter happened to be the wife of Rab Meir. Okay, her name was Bruria, a very wise woman, a fascinating woman. And Bruria is informed that her sister is in a brothel and she wants something done. So she has a very creative husband, a very brilliant and great scholar by the name of Rab Meir. And she says, Rab Meir, guess what you're doing? You're working out a way of getting my sister out of there. Okay? She was not targeted by the Romans because she was already married to Rab Meir. She was not associated with the family. But here we go. Bruria, the Beisayu de Rab Meir, the wife of Rab Meir, who was the Barte, the daughter of Chanina ben Tradion, the other daughter. Have she was. Amra lo, so she turns to her husband and she says, Zila v'milsa, this is very shameful. The Yosva achasoy, that my sister is sitting bekuva shel zonos in a brothel. Do something, husband. And he does. So what do? The first thing you need to go ahead is start working on the bribery. Shakal tarkova de dinara, he took a measurement of 3 kavs of dinarim. Okay, so it's a measurement of a lot of currency here. V'ozel, and he made his way. Okay, now he said to himself the following: to get a woman out of such a situation, it's supernatural, right? B'derech hateva, in the course of it ain't going to work. But if she retained her purity somehow in that environment, so she's a very righteous young lady, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to work it out for her. And therefore he expressed this idea. Omar, ilo yisavet ba'isura, if no violation was done by her or through her, misavet banisa, a ness is going to occur, some miracle is going to occur. But of the isura, I know the fact that if unfortunately she was violated, lo yisavet lanisa, a ness will not occur. So here we go. Ozal. So Rameir goes, nokat nafshe kechad parsha, and first he wants to verify her status. So what does he do? He gets dressed up as some kind of a Roman personality or official. Omar lo, and he turns to her, as is done in a brothel, Hashmi eneli, let's have a relationship. And she tried getting out of it, and it's going to be clear to Rameir that this is the system she used every single time, right? A desperate male walked into her room. Omra alei, dashtana amini, I'm doing my period now. It's no way, not doable. So he said to her, okay, Omar lo matrecha, I'll just wait, I'll wait for you. She said, nah, what a waste of time. Omar lo nafishin tuva deshapir minai. Go to other rooms, you'll find much better candidates for the activities you're interested in. And he realized that this was the way she operated. She got rid of everyone. She kept her purity in that environment. So Rameir says, boy, she is worthy of a ness. So now it's time to start working on the ness approach, supernaturally, to get her out of there. Amar shmami no, I can derive from her answer, lo avda isura, she did not violate herself. And therefore, why? Because kol da'asi, whoever shows up, amar le hachi, this is what she would say. So now it's time to work on actually getting her out. Ozal legabei shomer, goes to the gardida. Amar le havani ale, I want this young lady. Omar Lei said to him, what do you know? It's mistafinu mimalchusa. In other words, it seems like I got a license from the government, right, to go ahead and do so. There's an X amount of women that they expect to bring income. I cannot just go ahead and release her. Omar Lei shekoltar kovad de dinra. Here, take these 3 kav of dinar. Here's a nice amount of money. Palgo plachu, palgo lehaveloch. In other words, part of the currency, part of the monies I give you, you could go ahead and use to pay upward the loss of income, and part for yourself. It's them, okay, that's a short-term solution to the problem. But what happens eventually when they expect more income in the future? Omar Lei, so the guard of this brothel, turns to Rameir and he says to him, Vechi shalmi, and when the currency runs out, Ma yavid, what am I supposed to do? Omar Le, he said to him, Ema, you can make the following statement, and it could be you've seen it once, you have seen on a pushka the statement. Eloko, in other words, again, listen to this. Rameir is saying to the guard in a brothel, Eloko de Meir Aneni, may the God of Meir Aneni, right, answer my prayers. Okay, so it's interesting that became a very popular saying to give tzedakah and Meir in memory of Rameir Balanes, and it originated in a very interesting place. Okay, and he told him, and as a result of doing so, umitatzalta, you're going to be saved by doing so. Okay, you know we have Elokei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, but the truth is, the idea behind it is, Rameir is a very righteous person. We all have a personal connection to Hashem, and he said to him, "Listen, remember the God that of the Jew Meir that you interacted with. That's how you're going to be protected, and that's going to assist you in dealing with future issues you're going to have due to the fact that you released a young lady from the brothel." Now, he didn't buy it. Right? You don't believe anyone that just walks in and says something spiritual to you. Omar Le, he said to him, whoa, wait a second. Umi yemar dehachika. Who says that works? Right? You know, it's fish oil. Like snake oil. How do I know this works? We're on Amud Beis on the top. So he said to him, let's try that. Omar Le hashta, you'll see. Okay, so it seems to be that Have Hanu Kalve. There were a few very violent dogs that were consuming people. And what they did was to prove that this statement, may the God Elokah Demer Ani, to prove that it works. Shakal Kala Shadabahu. So he took some kind of clog of earth, they threw it at a dog, and the natural thing for a dog to do was to attack and consume the person. The dogs came to eat. Omar, and this Roman official, the guard, said, Elokah Demer Aneni. And it worked, Shafku. Okay, so here we have a solution. V'yavle. Okay, so she is released. Baruch Hashem, she's out. She's pure. A happy ending here. But listen to what happened with this guard. L'sof ishtama milsa be malka. Eventually, word got out to the kingdom that he released one of the women. Asua, they took him. Askol is a kifon. They wanted to hang him. Omar, and he made that declaration, Eloko, the Meir, Aneni, may the God of Meir Aneni. And Achsua, and for whatever reason, they weren't able to execute him, and they released him. Omrule Maihai, how does this work? In other words, what system did you use? What exactly did you utter? Omar Lu Hachi Avamai said, he shared with him the whole story. So the Roman officials realized that this Rameir is a troublemaker. So they brought some professionals to describe how to create an image of him, right? Like you have in a police, you have the sketch artists that have the ability. So they got a sketch artist to go ahead and make a etching of Rameir. It'd be nice to find it somewhere in some archaeological site. And they brought one, and Chakeku ledmuse, those are the words. Chakeku, they etched out his image, de Rameir, and they placed it apischa de Romi, and they put it on the gate, probably of Caesarea, in a public place, and he became wanted. Right? Omru kol dechaze, whoever, this is the declaration that was made by Roman officials. They were unhappy with the activities of Rameir, that he released the young lady, and therefore they made the following declaration. Kol dechaze lepartsufa hadin, anyone that sees this face, leisia, they should bring him. Okay? Eventually, one day, they spotted him. Yuma chade chaziu, they spotted him. He realized he was identified. He ran, and Rot Basrei and Rot Mikamayu. In other words, they ran after him. He ran away, and he had to figure out a way of concealing his identity. Or obviously, the etch was not perfect. The etching was not perfect, and therefore he wanted to show that I'm not some great Jewish leader and Jewish scholar. So he performed acts to indicate that he's not the famous Rameir. Interesting ones of his choice. Number one, according to one tradition, is al lebeizonos, that there was a brothel. He just ran in, right? It seems to be that he already knew his way around and he was able to retain his purity. So why not? He ain't Rameir. How do you know he's not Rameir? Guess where he went? Okay, it's not Rameir, and they moved on. That's approach number one. Ika de Amri, there are those that say that he walked into the marketplace and they were cooking something non-kosher. Ika de Amri bishula ovet kochavim chaza. He saw something that was cooking that wasn't kosher. Tomash baho matek ba. So he put one finger in and he licked the other finger. So he performed that act, and the spies of the government realized this is not Rameir. Rameir ain't going to be tasting those things in the marketplace from food, the food in the street, and therefore his act of changing fingers was enough to go ahead and fool the officials. Ika da Amri, there are those that say that he had some assistance from above. Asa Elio Hanavi came. Idmi lehu kizona, and he acted like, or Elio Hanavi came in the form of a prostitute. Karchase, and she gave him, Mayor gave him a big hug, right? And the official said, wait a second, such activities don't fit into what a Rameir would do. And there, Amri chas v'shalom, God forbid, he Rameir, this is not what Rameir does. And he ran away. Rameir had to go into hiding. Kam oraki, asala Bavel, and that's how Rameir landed up in Babylonia. Right, he had an issue with the Romans in Israel. Maybe the Persians were already controlling the regions of Babylonia, and that is an end of his presence in the land of Israel. But there's a different tradition. Ika de Amri, there are those that say that the fact that he went to Babylonia was Mahai Maisa, was indeed from this story as described. But Ika de Amri, there are those that say that there was another event that caused him to run away to Babylonia, Mimaise de Bruria. So this is a very odd story, a very difficult story to read that Rashi shares with us, that his wife Bruria got involved, and she would make proclamations of the fact that, okay, you rabbis maybe perhaps label women as da'atan kalot, as being lightheaded and not so serious. I'm different. And a student was sent by Rameir to go ahead and entice her, and it seems to be that she got enticed even though she did not perform a wrong act. There was something shameful that occurred. You can look at a footnote if you want to read it in more detail, but the bottom line is that according to approach number two, the departure of Rameir from the land of Israel and the fact that he left to Babylonia was because it had an issue with the behavior of his wife. That's the end of that story. And now we go back a little bit to things that we avoid. Now we have to understand Roman culture and think about gladiators and the sport events that occurred in those days. And basically, if you have the ability to visit Rome or even Caesarea, if you visit Caesarea, you do know that they had an amphitheater there and they had a racetrack. And the Romans were very much involved in paganism and in murder. They did not value human life, right? If you're not a citizen, you're worth absolutely, garnish mit garnish. And therefore, for a Jew to make his way to one of those stadiums, right? To one of those stadiums and be involved in activities where they are worshiping their gods, where they are killing people, would be extremely problematic. In addition, what the Talmud is going to also note is that when you go to these forms of entertainment, even if you get around the issues of Avoda, Zara, of idolatry, and even if you get around the issues of Retzicha, of murder, there seems to be something called a Moshav Letzim. Moshav Letzim is to sit and be involved in something that's just light and a form of entertainment and emptiness. Now, we have to remember, while a little bit of murder is still murder, and a little bit of Avoda Zara is yes, Avoda Zara, a little bit of relaxation, there's nothing wrong with it. We need it, right? You could go mishuga if you don't have something to relax. So when you read these sections of the Talmud and you talk about stadiums and sports events and, following a losing team for 162 games, and when you read about it, remember, we don't have the Retzicha in our sports today, right? We don't have so much Avoda Zara. The Moshav Leitzim perhaps does apply, the fact that it's just light entertainment, that if you binge watch every single game in a row, you're obviously wasting time from something that's far more valuable, but a little bit of it would probably be fine. Ask your local rabbi what his opinion is, but that would seem to be what we're going to get from the Talmud. But keep in mind, Avoda Zara, Shvichas Damim, and Moshav Leitzim, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Ha'olech le'itztadiyanin, to stadium. Ulecharkom. Charkom could either be like a form of a circus, or sometimes when they would besiege a city, which would be months upon months, if not years, they created some entertainment around there. And it was good entertainment for the soldiers, right? They would bring in Bob Hope, whoever it is, they would entertain the soldiers. So you go to one of these formats of entertainment, Virosham, and you see there Nechashim, you see Go Ahead, and people that perform all kind of actions with snakes. And the Talmud here is going to give us all kind of different formats of entertainment and clowns and maybe pantomimes that were performing acts to entertain. So you see Nachashim, Chavarim that were able to perform things with snake charmers, Bukin, Mukin, Mulian, Ulian, Bulurian, Salgurian. These are all kind of different forms that I'm not familiar with them. Perhaps maybe a visit to one of them, Lihi Slamed, would be permissible. Hareze Moshav Leitzim. So the rabbis tell us, even if you get around issues of Retzicha and Avoda Zara, remember to make your life the goal to be entertained with every single such activity. You are involved in Moshav Leitzim. There's a verse, beginning of Tehillim. Ashrei Eish Asher Laholach. Blessed is the person, right? Who what? Who did not go in the path of the people who what? Are involved in evil and involved in as we'll see soon, the Talmud is going to go through this section and every single section of that chapter. But what should we yes be involved? Kim b'Torah Hashem chav, so the Torah of Hashem. Halamarito. You know what you learn from there? Shedvarim halal. When it comes to these forms of entertainment, meviim esa'odam li'dei bitul Torah. There's bitul Torah. Okay, so it seems to be up until now there is no heter to go to a itztadion, and there's no heter to go ahead and to be involved on this karkom and this circus. But the problem is there are sources that do give a green light. V'raminu the Talmud asks, holchem litztadion. And it's mutar, mipnei shetzavachu matzil. In other words, if it's a stadium and they have a Jew there, and the gladiators are coming and the animals are attacking, and you could go ahead and yell and scare off the animals, or maybe warn the Jew, you could actually save a life there. That's what the Talmud seems to be saying here. And elekarkom mutar, and it's permissible to come to these gatherings of circus-like, because why would it be permissible? Yushav Medina, you could assist, you could interact with Roman officials and do things that are good for the settlement of the country. But don't be counted among them, okay? But if you're counted with them, in other words, if you actually become part of them, according to some, if they used you for a census and make decisions based on it, osur. Now the bottom line is we have a contradiction. One source seems to say in stadion unacceptable, and one source says it's acceptable. The other one seems to see that the charkom, the circus-like, or the entertainment by a siege city is okay. The other one says not. Kasha stadion ad stadion, kasha karkom ar karkom. So how do we deal with the contradiction? So Bishlomo, I have a way of settling the karkom karkom lo kasha. I could deal with that contradiction. Kan be mischashavimon, kan be she'en mischashavimon. Because in the second brisa itself, it indicated that the issue is only if you go ahead and are counted among them. So maybe the prohibition applies when you are counted among them, you are involved with them, you become part of them. That would be problematic. If you're not there, you're only there to interact for some communal need, that would be permissible. Makes sense. There's a contradiction here, because we have here a statement that does give a green light in some situations to make your way to the Itztadion. The Talmud says Tanoi, it's actually a machlokes Tanoim, and we're going to introduce the opinion of Rab Nosson, who Rab Nosson gave a green light in some situations to make your way to the stadiums, to these environments. The Tanya Enochim Litztadion, opinion number one is you're not allowed to go to Itztadion mipnei. Now let's look carefully here. Although in our Talmud it says Moshav Letzim, many have the Girza mipnei shehen shofchei damim. Okay, that the prohibition of the stadium is because of the fact that they are killing people there. You are cheering there. Yeah, go ahead, bite off his head. If that's the environment you are in, that's the issue. Okay, that's where the stadiums, that's what the Romans were involved in. And Rab Nosson gives a green light. Number one, you have the ability to yell out and save a life. And number two is one of the people there is a man, right? And we are concerned that if he vanishes, the wife will never know that her husband was killed, and she's going to remain in Aguna. So therefore, it's permissible to go because you can go ahead and release an Aguna. That's a priority for us. And therefore, Rabbi Nosson gave a green light, and the statement that said it's permissible follows that school. Ton Rabban, the rabbi said, Rameir says you should know that to go to these environments of the theaters and the circuses is prohibited because it was part of their activity to honor their Avoda Zara. That's how Rameir says. Chachomim Omrim, listen, not all of them, but Mokom Shemesablim Bom Osur. In other words, yeah, if it is such a place, it's osur because it's similar. A person might suspect that you're involved in avodah zara. Meaning, while Rameir believes that it's 100% avodah zara, the rabbis are of the opinion that it might be. Now, if it's not an environment of idolatry and paganism, it's also mipnei moshav leitzim, because then you're involved in a moshav leitzim. So you see, again, we throw in Avodah Zara, Shvichas Damim, Moshav Leitzim. Now the Talmud wonders, what's the difference between Rabbi Meir's approach that it's 100% in activity of Avodah Zara, and the rabbis who say it might be benayu? What's the difference? The nafkamina would be if post facto you interact and you made some kind of transaction with them, and you walk away with goods. According to Rabbi Meir, the goods are 100% Avodah Zara goods, and according to the rabbis, it's not. Dorav Rav Shimon ben Pazi would say, what's the meaning of the verse? Ashrei ha'ish, praiseworthy is the person asher lo halach batzas rishaim, who does not go in the advice give of, or in the path of the rishaim, u'bederach hatoim lo aman, and he does not stand among the sinners, u'v'moshav leitzim lo yosham. And if you see a progression here, he did not walk, he did not stand, and did not sit. There's a progression. Now the issue is, if you don't walk, you're for sure not going to stand. And if you didn't stand, you're not going to sit. So how does the progression work? And how is that going to lead him to litzanut, to mockery? You know what this verse is teaching you? If a person is involved in walking with them, which shows no permanence, I'm just walking with people that have values that are far from mine. You know what's going to happen eventually? They're going to have an impact on you, and it's sofa la'amad. You're going to just stand with them. Eventually you're going to sit with them. If you interact and make your circle of friends people that have zero value and mock everything, sofa lolut, you're going to land up, unfortunately, a life of mockery. And you know what happens if we make everything into a mockery? Tragic. Allah the pasuk says, if you gain wisdom, if you study Torah, it's for yourself. That's really, really yours. But if you go ahead and mock everything, you're going to have to carry that burden alone. Don't mock everything, right? Omar Rab Elazar called me slowed sets. If someone laughs at everything, if nothing is serious, if nothing is an opportunity to learn from, Yisurin boin olav, lo aleinu, you get punished, because if you are not awakened by just thinking about the existence, Kadosh Baruch Hu places affliction upon such a person that awaken him. Shenemar vato alti slotzitsu. Don't be mockers. Penyechas kumastroisecha. Maybe you're going to go ahead and have to deal with yisurin, with pain and agony. Omar lu Rava. If you remember Rava, when we would open a lecture, he would start off with a milsa de b'dichus, a little bit of a joke. Right? That's the idea of starting a lecture with a joke or a speech with a joke. Rava would do so. And therefore he had to warn the rabbis, l'rabbanon b'matusa, I beg you. In other words, even though I start off with a joke, please don't make everything into a joke. And God forbid, I don't want any of my students to suffer from yisurin, from pain, from agony, and from suffering. Amarav Katina Kol Mislot says, if a person mocks, mizonosav mismaatim, it affects our sustenance, our income. Shenemar Moshach Yodas Lotisim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulls back his hand, the hand of God which feeds us is pulled back if everything is a joke. Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish called me Slosas Nofel beGehenim. You land up in Gehenim if everything is a joke. Shenemar Zad Yair Letz Shmo. Someone who is a sinner and is haughty, he is a mocker. Ose be'evra Zodon is going to eventually get into the Evra, which we'll see soon. Evra is a code word for Gehenna. Then Evra Gehenim Shenemar Yom Evra Yom Ahu. It's the day of Gehenna. Omar Rav Hosha Kol HaMisyahir. Now Rav Hosha says that you should know another thing that brings downfall to people is not just mockery, but haughtiness. And he uses the same verse to get his point across. Kol HaMisyahir, anyone that's haughty, nofel b'gehenna shenemar zed yahir, yehirut is haughtiness. Let Shmo, he's a mocker, oseb evras dodon. He's going to eventually make his way to the Evras, which is the wrath of Gehenna, and Evra Gehenna shenemar yom Evra yomahu. Omer Rav Chalino b'chinoi kol mislatzes garim kliya la'olam. If a person mocks, you should know that the destruction is not just to himself, but to the whole world. Shenemar va'ato al tislo tzetsu. Don't be mockers. Pen yeches kumosrachem ki kolo v'nechretzo. Shamat. In other words, it's going to bring about this destruction to the whole environment around you. Omer Rabbi Lazar koshehi. In other words, Rabbi Lazar says that it's very hard because shetchilosa yisurin. While if a person mocks and nothing is serious and nothing is an opportunity to learn from, it starts off with personal pain and agony and suffering, v'sofa kliya, but eventually it's going to bring about complete destruction. Dorav Shabshima ben Pazi ashreish asher lo holach to what? Letartiot v'lekarkesiot shalavdei kochavim. In other words, blessed is the person that doesn't go to these environments of Avoda Zara, shvichus damim, and letzomus. Ubederach chatoim lo omad, the shelo omad. What kind of violation can be done by standing? Bekangion, that you're not involved. This was a form of sport that they would use dogs for hunting. People would get heavily involved in it. Obviously, this was something that was very much moshech, meaning it was very relaxing and pulling and entertaining. And if a person's whole life is all about that, that is a person that we are told that it's a derech chatoim. Lo omad. He did not sit around with people that are just involved in all kind of activities of perhaps satisfying for the mind, but not fulfilling and not doing good for the spiritual or physical welfare of humanity. Shema Yomer Adam, a person might claim, Hoil v'lo halachti, you know what, I avoided going to Tartiot v'karkisiot. I didn't go to these theaters, I didn't go to these circuses. V'lo amadi b'kangion, I was not involved in these sport activities of hunting with dogs. So therefore, all I need to do to merit the world to come is to shlaf, go to sleep, right? I'm a righteous person, I'm a big tzaddik, right? I slept 16 hours straight. Elech v'zgara b'sheina. Now, it doesn't say a person should never sleep. It means that I'm going to go ahead and take pills and just make myself sleep through life and mission accomplished. Talmud Lomar, we are told, no, that's not the way it works. You know how you achieve spirituality? Be involved in the limud of Torah. And again, we make these drushes on these psukim. They are here to inspire us. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan, Ashrei Isha Shalaholach Batzas Risham. You want to know who is a person that was surrounded by evildoers, but was yet nevertheless able to retain the values and he did not follow them. Ze Avram Avinu Shaloholach Ba'atzas Anshe Dor HaFloga Shirashayim Hayu. There were the evildoers in that generation of Dor HaFloga, which you'll see in tomorrow's daf. And Avram Avinu lived his life by ignoring the environment and doing what was meaningful and inspiring to others. That's what we have for today. Thank you so much.